We're going to talk about comparing fractions to 1/2. 1/2 is a really important fraction that's useful in helping us think about the size of other fractions. We can use 1/2 in a lot of different ways. Because it's so important, we call 1/2 a benchmark fraction. A benchmark means very important and sort of a guide, a fraction that can help us understand other fractions. Let's look at this more carefully and see what I'm talking about. First of all, let's remind ourselves about some equivalent fractions. You see here that we have 4 number lines. All of our number lines have their zeros lined up on the left, and they all have their ones lined up on the right. That tells me that they all have fractions, or their wholes are the same size. And we already know it's important that when we compare fractions, the whole has to be the same size. The other thing I notice on this is that I have 4 fractions that are all lined up. 1/2, 2/4, 3/6, and 4/8, all lined up in a row, which tells me that those fractions are equivalent, right? 1/2 equals 2/4 and equals 3/6 and equals 4/8. That information is going to help us as we move forward. So let's look at these 2 fractions, 1/2 and 3/4. So far, when we have compared fractions, either the top number, the numerator, has been the same, or the denominator has been the same. But I notice in this case, my numerators are different and my denominators are different. Now, I certainly could draw a picture to help myself out with this, but I want to show you a different way to think about this, a different strategy that you could use. So let's go back to those number lines. Here I see that I have 1/2 and 2/4 lined up together, right? So I have my halves number line and my fourths number line. And this is showing me that 1/2 and 2/4 are equal to each other. This is important information for me to remember, because over here I'm comparing 3/4 to 1/2. Well, what if instead of comparing 3/4 to 1/2, I replaced that 1/2 with this 2/4? The 2/4 means the same thing as 1/2. It's just another name for 1/2. We already learned that in equivalent fractions, right? So what if I made it 2/4? Well, that's easy then. 2/4 is here on the number line. 3/4 is here on the number line. So 2/4 must be less than 3/4. And if 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2, and 2/4 is less than 3/4, then 1/2 must be less than 3/4, because they're the same. 1/2 and 2/4 are the same. Therefore, 1/2 must be less than 3/4. And I can see that on this number line. There's 1/2 over here, and I would have to move over there to get to 3/4, so it would be more on the number line. Let's look at this with another set of fractions. This time I have 1/2 and 2/6. I'm going to add my 6th number line, and I notice that 1/2 and 3/6 are the same. They're equivalent to each other. So if I'm trying to figure out which is bigger, 1/2 or 2/6, and I know that 3/6 is the same as 1/2, then I can replace my 1/2 with, you got it, 3/6. They're the same thing. Well, on this 6th number line, it's really clear. 2/6 is over here, 3/6 is farther along, so 3/6 must be bigger than 2/6. So if 3/6 is bigger than 2/6, and 3/6 is the same as 1/2, then 1/2 must be bigger than 2/6 also. And when I look at the number line, yeah, that makes sense. Here's 1/2, here's 2/6. 1/2 is clearly farther along on the number line. For today's seesaw activity, we're going to ask you to think about some different fractions and whether they are bigger than 1/2, less than 1/2, or equal to 1/2. So go ahead and log into your assignment and get started.